The quails. The prophecy of these men concerning the quails turned out as they had predicted, the quails being, as God had foretold Moses, no blessing to the people. For God said to Moses, "Tell the people to be prepared for impending punishment. They shall eat flesh to their satisfaction, but then they shall loathe it more than they now lust for it. I know, however, how they came to have such desires. Because my Shekinah is among them, they believe that they may presume anything. Had I removed my Shekinah, they would never have cherished so foolish a desire." Moses, knowing that the granting of the people's wish would be disastrous to them, said to God, "O Lord, why do you give them flesh and then, in punishment for their sin, kill them? Who ever heard of anyone say to a donkey, 'Here is a measure of wheat, eat it, for now we want to cut off your head'? Or to a man, 'Here is a loaf of bread, take it with you and go to hell'?" God replied, "Well then, what would you do?" Moses, "I'll go to them and reason with them, that they may stop lusting after flesh." God, "I can tell you right now that your endeavors in this matter will be fruitless." Moses then went to the people, saying to them, "Is the Lord now short-handed? Behold, he smote the rock, and the waters gushed forth, and the streams overflowed. He gives bread also. Can he not provide flesh for his people?" The people, however, said, "You are only trying to soothe us. God cannot grant our wish." But they vastly erred. For hardly had the pious among them retired to their tents, when upon the godless, who had remained in the open, quails came down as thick as snowflakes, so that many more were killed by the descent of the quails than later by the tasting of them. The quails came in such masses that they completely filled the space between heaven and earth. They even covered the sun, and settled down on the north side and the south side of the camp, a territory covering a day's journey, lying, however, not directly on the ground, but 2 cubits above it, that the people might not have to stoop to gather them up. Considering this abundance, it is not surprising that even the lame, who could not go far, and the lazy, who would not, gathered each 100 kor. These vast quantities of flesh did not, however, benefit them, for hardly had they tasted of it when they fell sick and gave up the ghost. This was the punishment for the worst sinners, while the better ones among them enjoyed the taste of the flesh for a month before they died. Whereas the pious, without suffering harm, caught the quails, slaughtered them, and ate them. This was the heaviest blow that had fallen on Israel since their exodus from Egypt, and in memory of the many men who had died because of their forbidden lusting after flesh, they changed the name of the place where this happened to Kibroth Hattava, the graves of those who lusted. The wind that brought the quails was so powerful a storm that it could have destroyed the world. So great was God's anger against the ungrateful people, and it was only due to the merits of Moses and Aaron that this wind only left the world on its hinges. Aaron and Miriam slander Moses. When the 70 elders were appointed, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon them, all the women lighted candles of joy, to celebrate by this illumination the elevation of these men to the dignity of prophets. Zipporah, Moses' wife, saw the illumination and asked Miriam to explain it. She told her the reason and added, "Blessed are the women who behold with their eyes how their husbands are raised to dignity." Zipporah answered, "It would be more proper to say, 'Woe to the wives of these men, who must now abstain from all conjugal happiness.'" Miriam, "How do you know this?" Zipporah, "I judge so from the conduct of your brother, for ever since he was chosen to receive divine revelation, he no longer comes to me." Miriam then went to Aaron and said to him, "I also received divine revelations, but without being obliged to separate myself from my husband." Aaron agreed, saying, "I too received divine revelations, without being obliged to separate myself from my wife." Then both said, "Our fathers also received revelations without discontinuing their conjugal life. Moses abstains only out of pride, to show how holy a man he is." Not only did they speak evil of Moses to each other, but went to him and told him to his face their opinion. But he, who could be self-assured and stern when it touched a matter concerning God's glory, was silent to the undeserved reproach they heaped on him, knowing that only by God's command had he forsworn earthly pleasures. God therefore said, "Moses is very meek, and pays no attention to the injustice dealt him, as he did when my glory was detracted, when he boldly stepped forward and exclaimed, 'Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come to me. I will therefore stand by him now.'" It is quite true that this was not the only occasion on which Moses proved himself humble and gentle, for it was part of his character. Never among mortals, counting even the 3 patriarchs, was there a man more meek. The angels alone excelled him in humility, but no human being, for the angels are so humble and meek that when they assemble to praise God, each angel calls to the other and asks him to precede him, saying among themselves, "You be the first. You are worthier than I." God carried out his intention to uphold Moses' honor, for just as Aaron was with his wife, and Miriam with her husband, a divine call suddenly reached Amram's 3 children, one voice that simultaneously called, "Aaron, Moses, Miriam," a miracle that God's voice alone can perform. The call went to Moses also, so that the people might not think Aaron and Miriam had been chosen to take Moses' place. Moses was ready to hear God's words, but not so his brother and his sister, who had been surprised in the state of uncleanness, and who therefore, upon hearing God's call, cried, "Water, water," that they might purify themselves before appearing before him. Then they left their tents and followed the voice until God appeared in a pillar of cloud, a distinction that was also conferred on Samuel. The pillar of cloud did not, however, appear in the tabernacle, where it always rested whenever God revealed himself to Moses, and this was due to the following reasons. First of all, God did not want to create the impression of removing Moses from his dignity and of giving it to his brother and sister. So he did not appear to them in the holy place. At the same time, however, Aaron was spared the disgrace of being reproached by God in his brother's presence, for Moses did not follow his brother and sister, but waited God's word in the sanctuary. But there was still another reason why God did not want Moses to be present during his conference with Aaron and Miriam. Never praise a man to his face, and as God wanted to praise Moses before Aaron and Miriam, he preferred to do so in his absence. Hardly had God addressed Aaron and Miriam when they began to interrupt him, whereupon he said to them, "Contain yourselves until I have spoken." In these words he taught people the rule of politeness, never to interrupt. Then he said to them, "Since the creation of the world, has the word of God ever appeared before any prophet otherwise than in a dream? Not so with Moses, to whom I have shown what is above and what is below, what is before and what is behind, and what was and what will be. To him have I revealed all that is in the water and all that is on the dry land. To him I confided the sanctuary and set him above the angels. I myself ordered him to abstain from conjugal life. And the word he received was revealed to him clearly, and not in dark speeches. He saw the divine presence from behind when it passed by him. How then that you are not afraid to speak against a man like Moses, who is, moreover, my servant? Your rebuke is directed to me rather than to him, for the receiver is no better than the thief. And if Moses is not worthy of his calling, I, his master, am not worthy either." Miriam's punishment. God now gently rebuked Aaron and Miriam for their transgression, and did not give vent to his wrath until he had shown them their sin. This was an example to man, never to show anger before giving his reason for anger. The effects of God's wrath were shown as soon as he departed from them, for while he was with them, his mercy exceeded his anger, and nothing happened to them. But not long after he left, punishment set in. Both Aaron and Miriam became leprous, for this is the punishment ordained to those who speak ill of their neighbors. Aaron's leprosy lasted only a moment, for his sin had not been as great as that of his sister, who was the one who started the talk against Moses. His disease vanished as soon as he looked upon his leprosy. Not so with Miriam. Aaron, in vain, tried to direct his eyes upon her leprosy, and in this way to heal her. But in her case, the effect was the reverse. As soon as he looked upon her, the leprosy increased, and nothing remained but to call for Moses' assistance, who was ready to give it even before being called. Aaron then turned to his brother with the following words: "Think not that the leprosy is on Miriam's body only. It is as if it were also on the body of our father Amram, of whose flesh and blood she is." Aaron did not, however, try to extenuate their sin, saying to Moses, "Have we, Miriam and I, ever done wrong to a human being?" Moses: "No." Aaron: "If we have done evil to no strange people, how then can you believe that we wish to harm you? It was only for a moment that we forgot ourselves and acted in an unnatural way towards you, our brother. Shall we therefore lose our sister? If Miriam's leprosy does not now vanish, she must pass all her life as a leper, for only a priest who is not a blood relative may under certain conditions declare the leper clean, but all the priests, my sons and I, are her relatives by blood. The life of a leper is as of one dead. For as a corpse makes unclean all that come in contact with it, so too the leper." Aaron closed his intercession, saying, "Shall our sister, who was with us in Egypt, who with us intoned the song at the Red Sea, and who took upon herself the instruction of the women, shall she now, while we are about to leave the desert and enter the promised land, be shut out from the camp?" These words of Aaron, however, were quite superfluous, for Moses had determined, as soon as his sister had become diseased, to intercede for her with God, saying to himself, "It is not right that my sister should suffer and I dwell in contentment." He now drew a circle about himself, stood up, and said a short prayer to God, which he closed with the words, "I will not go from this spot until you have healed my sister. But if you do not heal her, I myself shall do so. For you have already revealed to me how leprosy arises and how it disappears." This prayer was fervent, spoken with his whole heart and soul, though very brief. Had he spoken long, some would have said, "His sister suffers terribly, and he, without heeding her, spends his time in prayer." Others would have said, "He prays long for his sister, but for us he prays briefly." God said to Moses, "Why do you shout so?" Moses: "I know what suffering my sister is enduring. I remember the chain with which my hand was chained, for I myself once suffered from this disease." God: "If a king or if her father had spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? I, the King of Kings, have spit in her face, and she should be ashamed at least twice 7 days. For your sake shall 7 days be pardoned her, but the other 7 days let her be shut out from the camp." For want of a priest who, according to the tenets of the law, must declare a leper clean after the healing, God himself assumed this part, declaring Miriam unclean for a week and clean after the passing of that period. Although leprosy came to Miriam as a punishment for her sin, still this occasion served to show how eminent a personage she was. For the people were breaking camp and starting on the march when, after having saddled their beasts of burden for the march, and turning to see the pillar of cloud moving before them, they missed the sight of it. They looked again to see if Moses and Aaron were in the line of the procession, but they were missing. Nor was there anywhere to be seen a trace of the well that had accompanied them on their marches. Hence they were obliged to return again to camp, where they remained until Miriam was healed. The clouds and the well, the sanctuary, and the 60 myriads of the people all had to wait a week in this spot until Miriam recovered. Then the pillar of cloud moved on once more, and the people knew that they had been permitted to proceed on their march only because of this pious prophetess. This was a reward for the kind deed Miriam had done when the child Moses was thrown into the water. Then Miriam for some time walked up and down the shore to await the child's fate, and for this reason the people waited for her. The sending of the spies. The punishment that God brought on Miriam was meant as a lesson of the severity with which God punishes slander, for Miriam spoke no evil of Moses in the presence of anyone except her brother Aaron. She had, moreover, no evil motive, but a kindly intention, wishing only to induce Moses to resume his conjugal life. She did not even dare rebuke Moses to his face, and still, even in spite of her great piety, Miriam was not spared this heavy punishment. Her experience, nevertheless, did not awe the wicked men, who shortly after this incident made an evil report of the promised land, and by their wicked tongues stirred up the whole people in rebellion against God, so that they wanted to return to Egypt rather than enter Palestine. Punishment that God inflicted on the spies, as well as on the people they had seduced, was well deserved. For, had they not been warned of slander by Miriam's example, they might have had some excuse. In that case they might have been ignorant of the gravity of the sin of slander, but now they had no excuse to offer. When Israel approached the boundaries of Palestine, they appeared before Moses, saying, "We will send men before us, and they shall search out the land, and bring us word which way we should go, and into what cities." This desire caused God to exclaim, "What? When you went through a land of deserts and of pits, you had no desire for scouts. But now that you are about to enter a land full of good things, you wish to send out scouts?" Not only was this desire in itself unseemly, but also the way in which they presented their request to Moses. For instead of approaching as they had been accustomed, letting the older men be the spokesmen of the younger, they appeared on this occasion without guidance or order, the young crowding out the old, and these pushing away their leaders. Their bad conscience after making this request, for they knew that their true motive was lack of faith in God, caused them to invent all sorts of pretexts for their plans. They said to Moses, "So long as we were in the wilderness, the clouds acted as scouts for us, for they moved before us and show us the way. But they will not proceed with us into the promised land, so we want men to search out the land for us." Another plea that they urged for their desire was this: "The Canaanites fear an attack from us and therefore hid their treasures. This is the reason why we want to send spies there, to discover where they are hiding their treasures." They tried in other ways to give Moses the impression that their one wish was exactly to carry out the law. They said, "You taught us that an idol to which homage is no longer paid may be used, but otherwise it must be destroyed. If we now enter Palestine and find idols, we shall not know which of them were adored by the Canaanites and must be destroyed, and which of them are no longer adored, so that we might use them." Finally, they said the following: "You, our teacher, have taught us that God would little by little drive the Canaanites before us. If this be so, we must send out spies to find which cities we must attack first." Moses allowed himself to be influenced by their talk, for he also liked the idea of sending out spies, but not wishing to act arbitrarily, he submitted to God the desire of the people. God answered, "It is not the first time that they disbelieved my promises. Even in Egypt they ridiculed me. It has now become a habit with them, and I know what their motive is. If you wish to send spies, do so, but do not pretend I have ordered you." Moses then chose one man from every tribe, with the exception of Levi, and sent these men to spy out the land. These 12 men were the most distinguished and most pious of their respective tribes, so that even God gave his assent to the choice of every man among them. But hardly had these men been appointed to their office when they made the wicked resolve to bring back an evil report and dissuade the people from moving to Palestine. Their motive was purely personal, for they thought to themselves that they would retain their offices at the head of the tribes so long as they remained in the wilderness, but would be deprived of them when they entered Palestine. Significant names. Significant of the wickedness of these men are their names, all of which point to their godless action. The representative of the tribe of Reuben was called Shemua, son of Zachar, because he did not obey God, which was counted against him just as if he had pursued sorcery. Shaphat, son of Hori, was Simon's representative. His name signifies he did not conquer his evil inclination and hence went out empty-handed without having received possession of the land of Israel. The tribe of Issachar was represented by Igal, the son of Joseph. He bore his name because he soiled the reputation of the Holy Land and therefore died before his time. Benjamin's man was Palti, the son of Raphu, so called because he spat out the good qualities that had previously been his and therefore wasted away. The name of Gadiel, son of Sodai, Zebulon's representative, signifies he spoke infamous things against God in executing the secret plan of the spies. Manasseh's man, Gadai, son of Susi, was so called because he blasphemed God and aroused his wrath, for it was he who said of the land, "It eats up its inhabitants." But the worst one among them was Amiel, the son of Jamali, of Dan, for it was he who said, "The land is so strong that not even God could go up against it." Hence his name, which means, "He cast a shadow on God's strength." And he was punished according to his wicked words, for he did not enter the promised land. Asher's man was Sethur, son of Michael, who had resolved to act against God, and instead of saying, "Who is like God?" he said, "Who is God?" Naphtali's man was named Nabai, the son of Vophshi, for he suppressed the truth, and faith found no room in his mouth, for he brought forth lies against God. The last of these spies, Gad's representative, bore the name Jeuel, son of Maki, for he was humbled because he urged untruths against God. As the 10 sinners were named in accordance with their actions, so too did the names of the 2 pious spies among them correspond to their pious actions. Judah's man was named Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, because he spoke what he felt in his heart and turned aside from the advice of the rest of the spies. The pious man of Ephraim was Hoshea, the son of Nun, a fitting name for him, for he was full of understanding and was not caught like a fish by the spies. Moses, who perceived even when he sent out the spies the evil intentions they harbored, changed Hoshea's name to Joshua, saying, "May God stand by you, that you may not follow the counsel of the spies." This change of name that was brought about by the prefixing of the letter Yod silenced the lamentations of the letter I. For ever since God had changed Sarai's name to Sarah, the letter I used to flit around the celestial throne and lament, "Is it because I'm the smallest among the letters that you have taken me away from the name of the pious Sarah?" God quieted this letter, saying, "Formerly you were in a woman's name, and moreover at the end. I will now fix you to a man's name, and moreover at the beginning." This promise was redeemed when Hoshea's name was changed to Joshua. When the spies set out on their way, they received instructions from Moses how to conduct themselves, and what in particular they were to note. He ordered them not to walk on the highways, but to go along private pathways, for, although the Shekinah would follow them, they were to avoid needless danger. If they entered a city, however, they were not to slink like thieves in alleyways, but to show themselves in public and answer those who asked what they wanted by saying, "We came only to buy some pomegranates and grapes." They were emphatically to deny that they had any intention of destroying the idols or of felling the sacred trees. Moses furthermore said, "Look about carefully what manner of land it is, for some lands produce strong people and some weak. Some lands produce many people and some few. If you find the inhabitants dwelling in open places, then know that they are mighty warriors, and, depending upon their strength, have no fear of hostile attack. If, however, they live in a fortified place, they are weaklings, and in their fear of strangers seek shelter within their walls. Examine also the nature of the soil. If it is hard, know that it is fat, but if it is soft, it is lean." Finally, he told them to inquire whether Job was still alive, For if he was dead, then they needed not to fear the Canaanites, as there was not a single pious man among them, whose merits might be able to shield them. And truly, when the spies reached Palestine, Job died, and they found the inhabitants of the land at his grave partaking of the funeral feast. The spies in Palestine. On the 27th day of Siwan, Moses sent out the spies from Kadesh Barnea in the wilderness of Paran. And, following his directions, they went first to the south of Palestine, the poorest part of the Holy Land. Moses did like the merchants, who first show the poorer wares and then the better kind. So Moses wanted the spies to see the better parts of the land the farther they advanced into it. When they reached Hebron, they could judge what a blessed land this was that had been promised to them. For although Hebron was the poorest tract in all Palestine, it was still much better than Zoan, the most excellent part of Egypt. When therefore the sons of Ham built cities in several lands, it was Hebron that they erected first, owing to its excellence, and not Zoan, which they built in Egypt fully 7 years later. Their progress through the land was on a whole easy, for God wished it so. As soon as the spies entered a city, the plague struck it, and the inhabitants, busied with the burial of their dead, had neither time nor inclination to concern themselves with the strangers. Although they met no evil on the part of the inhabitants, still the sight of the 3 giants, Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, inspired them with terror. These were so immensely tall that the sun reached only to their ankles, and they received their names in accordance with their size and strength. The strongest of them was Ahiman. When you looked at him, you fancied yourself standing at the foot of a mountain that was about to fall, and exclaimed involuntarily, "What is this coming on me?" Hence the name Ahiman. The second brother was strong as marble, therefore he was called Sheshai, marble. The mighty strides of the third brother threw up plots from the ground when he walked, so he was called Talmai, plots. Not only the sons of Anak were of such strength and size, but his daughters too, whom the spies happened to see. When they reached the city of Anak, it was called Kiriath Arba, city of 4, because the giant Anak and his 3 sons lived there. They were struck with such terror by the daughters that they sought a hiding place. But what they thought to be a cave was only the rind of a huge pomegranate that the giant's daughter had thrown away, as they later, to their horror, discovered. For this girl, having eaten the fruit, remembered that she must not anger her father by letting the rind lie there, and picked it up with the 12 men in it, as one picks up an eggshell, and threw it into the garden, never noticing that she had thrown with it 12 men, each measuring 60 cubits in height. When they left their hiding place, they said to one another, "Whoa, think of the strength of these women, and then how strong the men must be." They soon had an opportunity of testing the strength of the men, for as soon as the 3 giants heard of the presence of the Israelite men, they pursued them. But the Israelites found out what manner of men they were dealing with even before the giants had caught up with them. One of the giants shouted, and the spies fell down like dead men, so that it took a long time for the Canaanites to restore them to life by aid of friction and fresh air. The Canaanites then said to them, "Why do you come here? Does not the whole world belong to your God, and did not he parcel it out according to his wish? Did you come here to cut down the sacred trees?" The spies declared their innocence, and the Canaanites permitted them to go their way unmolested. As a reward for this kind deed, the nation to which these giants belonged has been preserved to this day. They would certainly not have escaped from the hands of the giants had not Moses given them 2 weapons against them, his staff and the secret of the divine name. These 2 brought them salvation whenever they felt they were in danger from the giants, for these were none other than the seed of the angels, fallen in the antediluvian era. From their union with the daughters of men, and being half angels and half men, these giants were only half mortal. They lived very long, and then half of their body withered away. Threatened by an eternal continuance of this condition, half life and half death, they preferred either to plunge into the sea or by magic herb, which they used to put an end to their existence. They were furthermore of such enormous size that the spies, listening one day while the giants discussed them, heard them say, pointing to the Israelites, "Those grasshoppers by the trees look like men." For so they were in their sight. The spies, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, had resolved from the start to warn the people against Palestine, and so great was their influence that Caleb feared he would yield to it. He therefore went to Hebron, where the 3 patriarchs were buried, and, standing at their graves, said, "Joshua is armed against the pernicious influence of the spies, for Moses prayed to God for him. Send up prayers now, my fathers, for me, that God in his mercy may keep me far from the counsel of the spies." There had always been a clash between Caleb and his comrades during their crossing through Palestine, for where he insisted on taking along the fruits of the land to show their excellence to the people, they strongly opposed this suggestion, wishing as they did to keep the people from getting an impression of the excellence of the land. Hence they yielded only when Caleb drew his sword, saying, "If you will not take the fruits, either I will kill you, or you will kill me." Then they cut down a vine, which was so heavy that 8 of them had to carry it, each taking the burden of 120 seah. The 9th spy carried a pomegranate, and the 10th a fig, which they brought from a place that had once belonged to Eshcol, one of Abraham's friends. But Joshua and Caleb carried nothing at all, because it was not consistent with their dignity to carry a burden. This vine was of such gigantic size that the wine pressed from its grapes sufficed for all the sacrificial libations of Israel during the 40 years' march. After the lapse of 40 days they returned to Moses and the people, after having crossed through Palestine from end to end. By natural means it would not, of course, been possible to traverse all the land in so short a time, but God made it possible by bidding the land to leap before them, and they covered a great distance in a short time. God knew that Israel would have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, a year for every day the spies had spent in Palestine. Hence, he hastened their progress through the land, that Israel might not have to stay too long in the wilderness. Next, the slanderous report. End part 61 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.